Broadcasting from the #1 news network in North America. It's the show for the next generation of Americans. It's Kilmeade and Friends.
We are not afraid, and our resolve will never waver in the face of terrorism. Democracy will always prevail.
This is the thing that keeps me up at night, worrying about where is the person who may be bent on the next San Bernardino, the next Orlando attack.
For 7.5 years, we have been promising the American people that we will repeal and replace this broken law, and tomorrow we're proceeding.
Where are you now, sir?
I'm still unknown.
Why?
Because we haven't been able to reach a point where the healthcare market is actually going to improve.
They're scrambling to find a bill that they can pass on the floor. I don't know if you want to call this, on Trump's part, a rookie's error.
To me, it's clear that I would be concerned if I was the president. And that's why I wanted him to know, and I felt like I had a duty and obligation to tell him.
To have our chairman take evidence that he received perhaps in the dead of night and not bring it to the committee was just a complete head-scratcher.
Was there an intent to abuse the listening in on the foreigners and improperly listen in on Americans? In the absence of a court order, you don't go listening in on American citizens.
America's solutions are discussed here.
Welcome to this special Friday edition of Kilmeade and Friends. I am not Brian Kilmeade. I am your humble guest host on this Friday. Pete Hegseth warming the seat for that man who gets a well-deserved day off. And sometimes they hand you the microphone on a Friday and the week is kind of just, blind to an end and there's no news. And what do you talk about? And Brian's been talking about stuff all week on Kilmeade and Friends. And by the way, you've been listening as an informed audience, and I always love joining you because your calls are great. I'm going to want them all morning as well. And sometimes you say, well, what am I going to talk about? I mean, you don't want to admit that when you do radio, that sometimes you're thinking about what in the world am I going to talk about? And then there are days like this where you don't have to wonder or worry what you're going to talk about because the news is coming to you and it's moving faster than you can even keep pace with. So we're going to keep that pace fast on today's show. And I want your calls and comments on all the news of the day. 1-866-408-7669. 1-866-408-7669. I mean, there's tons of stories, but the three biggies right now that I want to touch on throughout the course of this hour and this show are, of course, the new revelations and information coming out about the London terror attack, who this guy was, what his motivations were, what it tells us about the state of the world, the state of the UK, of London, of demographics, of allegiance, of ISIS's ability to motivate, of the Brits' ability to deal with this attack and this threat in their midst. It's a big question and an open question. The president's made comments about it in the past. We're going to revisit some of his thoughts on the issues of terror in the West, in Western Europe, and its potential to come to the United States. And the second big story is Devin Nunes and wiretapping and surveillance. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee on Wednesday, of course, going to the microphone, going to the White House, and talking about how he's been approached with new information that shows that then President-elect Trump was indeed surveilled one way or another, call it wiretapping, call it what you want, at Trump Tower during his transition. I mean, potential smoking gun, bombshell type stuff. What we're learning now is that today the NSA, and they're not getting much cooperation from the FBI. This is the House Intelligence Committee conducting this investigation. The FBI may be non-responsive, but the NSA is producing documents today that will likely, that Devin Nunes, the chairman, believes will show that there was indeed surveillance. Some reporting that's been done by James Rosen on this has been excellent, and part of an article he wrote today says that Intel is said to leave no doubt that the Obama administration used the cover of legitimate surveillance to spy and monitor President-elect Trump. There was an unmasking, meaning a revealing of the names of certain people on the Trump transition. There's no plausible or conceivable purpose for unmasking them other than to damage the incoming administration. If that is indeed the type of evidence that Devin Nunes has presented and showed the president and the committee will soon have, then it doesn't matter what the order was of who he told what and when. What matters is there now proof that the intelligence gathered, legitimately or otherwise, was disseminated to discredit the incoming administration? That's as bad as it gets. And when you talk to legal and intelligence experts, they'll tell you this is the type of thing a lot of people fear, is intelligence used for political purposes. The weaponization of intelligence is a dangerous thing in a republic, in a democracy, and new revelations on that could add yet another wrinkle to the reality that surveillance indeed did occur and would frankly vindicate the president and his the tweets of about now 3 weeks ago where he alleged that there was wiretapping at Trump Tower. So we're tracking that story as well. The third one, well, it's ongoing right now. If you're watching the Fox News channel right now, there are ongoing interviews across the board with members of the House, Republicans, because the Democrats aren't playing ball. Republicans are trying to get a repeal and replace of Obamacare passed today. The president last night said, we're done. That's it. We're voting tomorrow. Take it or leave it. He has no desire to get stuck on this issue, no desire to get stuck in an endless debate, a tug and pull between the Freedom Caucus and the moderates in his caucus. He really is, you might say, President Trump is doing Speaker Ryan's job for him, rolling up his sleeves, going to Capitol Hill, whipping votes with the Freedom Caucus and moderate members as well, trying to get to the magic number of 216 votes he's going to need to pass his repeal and replace of Obamacare out of the House. There's no doubt this is a gamble. This is a big, bold play. If he wanted to be more cautious, he could have pulled the bill. He could have gone for more negotiations, said we're going to take more time on this. Not a single person involved thinks this is a perfect bill. But what it does represent is the opportunity for the beginning of a repeal and replace of Obamacare. Nancy Pelosi said just a couple of days ago that, if they pass this bill, we're going to tattoo it to them in the 2018 midterms. Well, of course, Obamacare's original passage was tattooed to Democrats because of how that was handled. Well, let's say they do pass it. It gives them an opportunity to actually repeal and replace Obamacare. Let's say they don't. Then who's it tattooed to? Let's say the vote goes down today in the House. It does not pass. How about the Democrats who refuse to play ball or continually obstinate at every level? A lot of blame would fall at the feet of Speaker Ryan, who I believe misrepresented the amount of support for this bill in the way he presented it to the White House. I think the Trump administration was caught off guard by the depth of resistance to this bill. How it mirrored so much because of fears of loss of coverage or this or that. It mirrored so much kind of an Obamacare-light approach that conservatives were left saying, wait, why aren't we ending essential benefits? Why aren't we ending the backdoor individual mandate? Why are folks able to still stay on their parents' health care plan till they're 26? How is this going to truly decrease premiums and the costs of health care? A lot of questions that folks at the Freedom Caucus are asking. And then you've got Republicans on the other side of the spectrum, moderates, guys like Charlie Dent, representative from Pennsylvania, that are now pulling their support for the bill because it's too conservative. And so you've got this tug and pull of folks who are sort of effectively creating an opening for Obamacare to remain the law of the land. And so I like what President Trump is saying by saying we're going to have a vote. And after the vote, we're going to move on. Either we pass the bill and it goes to the Senate, or the bill goes down and I move on to fundamental tax reform. I wanted to get this done. You blocked it. That's tattooed to you. In the process, though, he's having to call out a lot of members. In fact, even just this morning, President Trump set out a couple of tweets, and you can kind of read his mindset usually by following his Twitter feed in the morning, which we do a great deal on Fox and Friends. And this morning, he has two tweets out right away focused on this issue. He says in the first tweet, after 7 horrible years of Obamacare, skyrocketing premiums and deductibles, bad health care, this is finally our chance for a great plan. Then he points out, and I'm going to go, Trent, to you in Alabama real briefly right after this, because he says the irony is that the Freedom Caucus, which is very pro-life and against Planned Parenthood, allows Planned Parenthood to continue if they stop this plan. That's the point a lot of people are making. They're not trying to make the argument that this is the best repeal and replace they've ever seen. They're making the argument that if you don't act on this, then you are enshrining Obamacare as the law of the land, because there will never be a moment like this once you move on to other issues. But in doing so, he's had to call out the Freedom Caucus. He's had to call out some conservative members to try to get them on board. Trent from Alabama, you've got an opinion about his sort of give and take with the Freedom Caucus. Good morning, Trent.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I just thought it was a little uncalled for him to take a dig at the Freedom Caucus, because if I'm not mistaken, these tax credits can be used to still pay for abortion under the plan. And so I think that's a totally uncalled for move that he did.
What he's talking about is public funding for Planned Parenthood, right? Is that, I mean, yes. I mean, I get what you're saying about a refundable tax credit being used for health care, but it's the direct funding of Planned Parenthood that so many conservatives and Freedom Caucus members have had issues with, right?
You may have a point there, sir. I just feel like it was a little heavy-handed for him to take a dig at them this morning.
I'll tell you that. No, Trent, I appreciate the call. It is a very interesting approach. There's no doubt. Trent points out that this is high stakes. You know, he's going to an issue that's very intimate and for a lot of conservatives, and that is pro-life and against Planned Parenthood. And he's saying, hey, Freedom Caucus, if you don't support this bill, you're effectively allowing the continued funding of Planned Parenthood. It doesn't feel like a core argument. It feels like an argument that's meant to push a few people over the edge who otherwise would be voting no, but they don't want to go home to their constituencies and say, I had a chance to end funding for Planned Parenthood, even if the bill is imperfect. And so, hey, I decided to vote for an imperfect bill, partly because ending Planned Parenthood's public funding is important to me as well. Very interesting angle. Again, this is the guy. It sounds cliche, and it kind of is, but it's true. The guy wrote The Art of the Deal, and one of the principles of The Art of the Deal is that if you see a bad deal, you don't dwell on it too long and hope it gets better. I think that's what you see on his call for a vote on Friday. And, hey, anybody who counts him out, I think is counting too soon. This is a guy who was counted out plenty of times during the election, told the numbers just weren't there. He's been working the phones. His allies have been working the phones, and we're going to see today when the vote happens, likely this afternoon. So we're talking about the London terror attacks. We're talking about the new revelations of potential wiretapping, Devin Nunes and others having a potential smoking gun in a new NSA intel report, and we're talking about Obamacare repeal as well, all morning long. The number is 1-866-408-7669 on Kilmeade and Friends.
Getting past all the rhetoric. Kilmeade and Friends.
Kilmeade and Friends, I'm Pete Hegseth. We've got calls on the line, and we're going to go straight to them. Join our fellow callers at 1-866-408-7669. We've got Mark in Springfield, Missouri. Mark, you've got a suggestion about Obamacare.
Yes, sir. I would, if I was the Speaker of the House, first thing I'd do is I'd bring up the old Obamacare bill. I'd put it before the House and say, let's all vote on this one first and see how many people actually vote for it now. I doubt even the Democrats would vote
So you're saying, let me unpack this. So you're saying I want the original bill, the let's pass it so we can find out what's in it, Nancy Pelosi bill from 2010, to see how many Democrats would still put their name behind it after the 7 years of disaster.
Exactly. How many of you out there are still doing it? I bet it'd be very few. And if it's very few, you say, look, this is why we want to improve this bill. We have to come up with something that works better. If the Democrats stand behind it 100%, you say, look, this is exactly where they are. They're living back here in the past and with a system that's not going to work.
Very interesting. Mark, it's an interesting suggestion which would reveal the depth of the opposition, the depth of how discredited Obamacare is, and then how unwilling Democrats are even to come to the table on any solution to Obamacare. Mark, thanks for the call. Before we go to other calls, we got to bring in our great next guest, Geraldo Rivera. He is the roaming correspondent at large here at the Fox News Channel and a friend of the show. Geraldo, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Pete. My pleasure. You know, I really agree with you. I think the Freedom Caucus is way out of line. When it comes to health care, I'm a health care for everybody, Medicare for everybody, single payer kind of person. But if you're going to have a different point of view, it seems to me that Trump Care or Ryan Care, whatever you call it, is a reasonable compromise move away from Obamacare. If you didn't like Obamacare, it certainly takes the sharp edges off. It's not perfect. But my goodness, if the Freedom Caucus cannot support the President of the United States on this compromise, then shame on them. They stand for nothing.
Well, where do you think this goes, Geraldo? If you tonight, does the vote go up or down?
I think it's very difficult for me to forecast because I was there when the Tea Party was starting, and you saw a dynamic coming out, like a phoenix, rising out of the earth. This, this reaction to liberalism and liberal spending, and you saw this movement happening, and that's what fueled the creation of groups like the Freedom Caucus. But now, that was when they were in the opposition during the Obama administration. That was one thing. Now this is a Republican president with a Republican Speaker of the House, with a Republican Senate. They've come to a hard-wrought compromise. I may not agree with it. There's a lot of things I think that has to be more generous to people. But my goodness, if they don't do this, then what the Freedom Caucus in effect has done is vote for a continuation of the thing they have professed to loathe, Obamacare.
Well,
and for Obamacare.
That's true. And the president out this morning tweeting that they're, a kind of a corollary to that if they vote against this, they're also voting to continue public funding of Planned Parenthood, which, of course, pro-life issues are of great deal of importance to a lot of members of the Freedom Caucus. I don't know if that's ultimately going to sway votes or not, but your point is, and I want to tie it to the next subject I want to ask you about, which is Devin Nunes and these new potential smoking gun intelligence reports, is the president, it appears, has been completely under siege from all sides. And if he can't get support even inside his party at this critical moment, then it does put at risk his entire agenda. The tax reform that he wants to do, immigration issues that he wants to tackle. So what does it say about the state of the Republican Party as well, that they're not willing to close ranks at this moment on something they've said they wanted to do for 7 years?
I absolutely agree with everything you just said. I think that the Freedom Caucus specifically, let's concentrate on the 35 or 40 members of the so-called Freedom Caucus. What on earth do they exist to do for their constituents? Did they get into office to be the party of no, or did they get into office to offer a conservative alternative to what was a progressive liberal administration? And this program certainly falls, Obamacare certainly falls within that realm. But if they don't back the President of the United States, who has had the very challenging task of bringing together the disparate factions within the Republican Party, then I think that the Freedom Caucus is no longer a Republican. They should just create a third party.
Well, they do represent, Geraldo, they do represent sort of the conscience of the conservative movement. Some are more libertarian than I would be, especially on national security issues. But I like them at the table pulling the bill away from what you want, which is single payer. I would say disaster if you look at the VA as a single payer model. If we gave that to everybody, so they're pulling away from single payer, which I like. But there's a point at which if you're just always an obstructionist, then you're never part of the solution. And I think that's part of what you're commenting on too, is at some point for your own president, you got to come to the table.
100%. I absolutely agree with everything you just said. If you're not for the president on this, then you are for everything you profess to loathe. You are, by your inaction or your negativity or your no vote, you're essentially empowering everything that you say you went into Congress to fight against.
Yeah. The question will be whether that message comes through. It really will be. Do these members want to go back to their district saying, I stood on principle for the purest possible repeal and replace that exists? Or do they want to go back and say, I stood by my president who's under siege from all sides? That will be maybe what comes down to those last few votes this afternoon. Geraldo, sorry our time was so short, but really always appreciate your insight here on Kilmeade and Friends.
My pleasure, buddy.
All right, stick around. We've got more. 1-866-408-7669.
If you're interested in it, Brian's talking about it. You're with Kilmeade and Friends.
Will the Prime Minister agree with me that what happened was not Islamic, just as the murder of Ari Neve was not Christian, and that in fact both are perversions of religion?
I absolutely agree. And it is wrong to describe this as Islamic terrorism. It is Islamist terrorism. It is a perversion of a great faith.
That was Theresa May, just yesterday, the British Prime Minister, talking about the attacks in London. It appears to me, parsing her words, the Islamic terrorism, Islamist terrorism. I get the difference between Islamic and Islamist, have written about it and talked about it a lot. But rather than just confronting it for what it is, a radical ideology, she seems to be tiptoeing around it. Sounds a lot like some echoes of the Obama administration as we enter yet another realization that this threat is going nowhere and continues to confront the West. We've got a great guest right now to help us break down what's been happening in London, as well as some of the new revelations about evidence that may exist on surveillance against President-elect Trump. His name is Dr. David Grantham. He's a senior fellow of national security at the National Center for Policy Analysis and a leading expert in national security matters and intelligence affairs, also a contributor to Town Hall. I will also note that David's a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. David, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me, Pete.
Appreciate you being on. So how would you grade the response of the Prime Minister of England, but also sort of their services generally toward the attack we saw this week?
If I could give it a grade, I'd say at least by statement would be a C at best. It sounds redundant, and like you said, it's echoes of past administrations, including the Obama administration. It strikes me, without having a bunch of time to sit here and dissect it, it just strikes me as a government that's out of ideas. They're out of solutions, and they continually revert back to a statement that offers no help to anyone, to including Muslims, who are the innocent Muslims, who are far often the victims of these people than anyone else. Of course.
No, I think that's true. I want to play a piece of sound from you from our current president as he was a candidate. He used the phrase Trojan horse, which didn't get a lot of attention here in our country, but I think speaks to some of the challenges that exist in London today. Let's play Trump in October of 2016, clip 10.
And this is what's caused the Great Migration. Tens of thousands of Syrian refugees who probably, in many cases, not probably, who are definitely, in many cases, ISIS-aligned. And we now have them in our country. And wait till you see, this is going to be the great Trojan horse. And wait till you see what happens in the coming years.
Now, he's talking about people coming into your country. You don't necessarily know where they're coming from or what their allegiance is. It's important to note that the attacker in London was British-born, but obviously radicalized. Does the UK have a full grip of what is in their midst, the way their demographics are changing, and the extent of the threat amongst them?
By the speech given yesterday, it doesn't seem like they do. And when Trump, that clip from Trump, I think sometimes his statement that definitely there are ISIS aligned, I mean, he doesn't know that. But the point he's trying to make, which he often doesn't articulate well, but I think the point he's trying to make is that Islamic or Islamist, they tout and they use the strategy of embedding like-minded people in refugee populations. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, told his CIA interrogators that is exactly what we do. We use that soft jihad or immigration jihad, civilization jihad. There's a bunch of different names for it. But they've told us this is exactly what we're going to do. And the question is, how do we defend against it? How do we define the threat? How do we identify the threat, and how do we keep the threat from coming in?
So, David, how do you do that?
London doesn't have.
Because London, take, for example, London. The one statistic I've cited a number of times is the most popular boy's name for a newborn boy in London today 3 times over is Muhammad. Refugees and migrants are coming and having large families when your traditional Brit is having, 1 or 2. Eventually, over time, that changes things. Again, that doesn't mean that all Muslims are radicals or all Muslims support Islamism. It's this recognition that but there are seas in which radicals swim, neighborhoods, areas where radical mosques exist, where hatred is preached. How does a Western civilization that's committing its own suicide in some ways by giving up what it believes in confront such a coherent Islamist threat in its midst?
That's a difficult question. They're probably one of the reasons why many governments haven't responded well. But I think there's two things, and these are going to sound general, but for the sake of time, one is redefining immigration standards. That's one. Second is not taking lightly when you have radical imams, when you have teachings, when you have individuals that are known to teach or engage in or communicate with people that are radicalized or advocate for those things. I think there should be a certain standard by which, if you're in a country such as England or the United Kingdom, anywhere, that there's a standard set, and there are laws that don't allow for you to at least, you can't yell fire in a movie theater, for example. There should be a certain standard of a limit there with language.
Of course, yeah, and also, but a lot of that starts with a recognition that you're at war, because we afford so many freedoms to people across the spectrum on speech and association and others because free societies do that. But when you've got an enemy that has declared war on you, and then you have citizens in your own country. I mean, in the UK, what is it? 500-600 Brits went to go fight with ISIS and came back to the UK. You've got clear enclaves of places where radicalism is preached and taught. Yet sort of civil liberties protect a lot of that because, well, in times of peace you would. But if you've got an enemy who's at war with you, man, I feel like that's what President Trump and others are sort of speaking to, is that the idea of the nation state is under threat by a new type of threat that we don't fully yet understand, that is, whether it's ISIS directed or ISIS inspired, that's almost semantic. I mean, they're important to guys like you and me, but ultimately, it's the ideology that's motivating someone to go out there and ram cars into people and stab them to death.
And I think you pointed out something that too often the government and in the military we say don't fight the last war. You've got to realize your enemy is new. There's certain elements that are new. You have to address it again. I think sometimes the government operates from the notion that they want to avoid unintended consequences, or they want an enemy like Nazi Germany that at the time was a clear evil.
Sure.
Once they actually acted. Where there's a lot of ambiguities. There's a lot of isolated incidents. So the government has lost any sense of creativity, or if they had any to begin with, and there's a standard that is just unachievable when it comes to identifying the enemy, and that they have to be pure evil and clearly defined and in a uniform. And he goes, guys, we've got to think differently. We've got to be creative, and like you said, we have to accept that we are at war with an ideology.
That's
no
right.
matter how
no
matter how small the percentage, we are at war.
And once you declare that, it's exhausting to think about what it would take to ultimately defeat it, and also the scope and size of the problem. It's not just in Iraq and Syria with ISIS as we close in on Mosul and Raqqa and all those fights. It's in the streets of Europe, and we've seen it in our own streets as well. But I want to get your comment on the recent revelations from Devin Nunes, the House Intel chairman, about the fact that he's been given information that he believes shows that either through incidental surveillance or otherwise, that there's almost no doubt that the Obama administration used some cover of legitimate surveillance to surveil President-elect Trump in November, December, January, and that unmasking of certain people in the Trump transition, there's almost no plausible purpose for that unmasking other than to damage an incoming administration. The NSA is said to be producing documents today to the House Intel Committee that show this. I mean, you've been involved in intelligence matters and understand the scope of this. How damaging? I mean, what kind of smoking gun could they have, and how bad could it be?
I think what it boils down to is the unmasking. Because if you look back at the Obama administration, they went out with James Rosen, the reporter. I mean, they legally went after him in what many experts called a chilling effect on the free press, but they did it, and they did it legally. So at the end of the day, it was simply it looked nefarious, but it was still legal. I think the unmasking is what Americans need to pay attention to, because even if they were inadvertently collected, as was so claimed, someone then took that inadvertent, quote-unquote, inadvertent collection and then unmasked the Americans names, and that's what it means, is that Americans' names are always blotted out. American Citizen 1, American Citizen 2. Here, someone went in there and revealed that name. I think that's the issue, and to me, it shouldn't be terribly difficult to identify who or what group of people decided to unmask that. That should be record somewhere in a classified document, somewhere in government circles. So that, to me, is the crux of it. Once you find out who unmasked it and why, then your circle of or your investigation can grow.
Yeah, it's a crux, but it's also a crime, as you know. And getting to the bottom of that would start to point to who may have had a political agenda to push this intelligence around, much of which has led to the leaks that have led to so much of the scrutiny and really combative nature against the Trump administration. David, we're going to have to leave it right there. Really appreciate David Grantham joining us as a senior fellow of national security at the National Center for Policy Analysis. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Pete.
You got it. Well, we've got a lot more here on Kilmeade and Friends. We're going to keep talking London terror. We're going to keep talking about the crux of the issue, as David said, on the wiretapping and Devin Nunes and what he may know. And then we are watching in real time the debate unfold on the repeal and replace of Obamacare. On the other side of the break, I want to get even more of your thoughts on the implications of this Obamacare vote and share some of mine about kind of the bold moves that the president has made and what it says about his agenda going forward. But I want your thoughts, and I want them, especially if they don't agree with mine. A healthy debate. I'm ready for a feisty debate today on Kilmeade and Friends. The number is 1-866-408-7669. Kilmeade and Friends, 866-408-7669. For your Friday, I'm back, and that means the good music is back as well. You should let Brian know that. Tweet at him or give him a call. Let him know. When Pete's in, the music is good. When he's in, not so much. Just be nice about it, because we like Brian Kilmeade and his music choices, but we love the music choices that come around when I have the opportunity to be his humble guest host. So. Good music on Fox and Friends. I was on Fox and Friends. I don't know how Brian keeps his mind straight on these days. Now we're at Kilmeade and Friends talking about some of the things we were talking about Fox and Friends this morning. And on Fox and Friends, we talked about, and your calls are coming in, keep them coming, 1-866-408-7669. A lot of them focused on health care, which is what I want to talk about right now for the few minutes at the bottom of this hour. I love what President Trump did last night. I love him sending out Mick Mulvaney and sending out Speaker Ryan to say, we're having a vote and we're having it tomorrow. Hell or high water. I don't know what the vote count is completely, but I'm telling you now, it's put up or shut up time. It's take it or leave it. I don't want to get stuck on this issue. I don't want to get into the muck of endless negotiations where I'm never going to win, especially if the Freedom Caucus is going to die on their hill no matter what. I know, and again, I have a lot of respect for members of the Freedom Caucus. I believe you have to have principle and a conscience and fight for the best possible bill. But there's a point at which it becomes counterproductive as well. If moderate Republicans are gonna leave because they'd rather have Obamacare, of course the Democrats are sitting on the sidelines. We're voting. We're voting now. And, there's an interesting angle to this. This guy's an expert negotiator. He is. Now, real estate in New York is different than politics in D.C. Get it. But, regardless of the outcome, you could argue that President Trump has succeeded kind of one way or the other. He's maneuvered himself to a point where if it passes, he wins. He calls for a vote. He passes in the House. Everyone's counting him out right now, which is a bad idea because this guy's gonna twist arms today, and I think has a chance to get to the number that he needs. If he passes, it's a big win, and it gives him momentum. The Senate's going to be tough. There's other places where it's going to be tough, but he showed that when the rubber hits the road, he can get the votes. If it fails, why is it his fault? It's not. I mean, he got a bill handed to him by Speaker Ryan that, I think was mischaracterized in how much support it had. Then he rolled up his sleeves and basically did the Speaker's job for him by whipping for the bill. And I think, if it fails, he's learned a lot from this, and he's going to move on now because he called a vote and says we're moving on no matter what, moving on to issues that matter even more to him. I think Tucker Carlson had a very interesting take last night on his show about immigration, because if he moves on from here, he goes to fundamental tax reform or immigration, and then he can take what he's learned and apply it. Take a listen to what Tucker said last night, clip 31.
So if he wants to make good on his most basic promise to the country, the president will have to make Congress fall in line, and there's only one way to do that. Fear is the most primal of all emotions, and it's the most effective motivator known to politics. If the president wants an immigration bill, the White House ought to present its plan, not talking points, but a real plan with details. Explain what it is, why it works, how it will make the American middle class stronger than it already is, and then wield the stick. Make it plain that if Republican members of Congress won't back that bill, the White House will support primary efforts by those who will back the bill. And that will work. Nothing else will.
That's exactly right. 2 points about that are exactly right. One is you got to make it, lay out the plan as you want it. Don't let anybody else write it. Don't let someone else's agenda, like Speaker Ryan, set the tone. Write what you want. Present it as such. Have it carried as such on the Hill. And then you really can wield the stick because you were truly elected. I mean, yes, President Trump was elected to repeal and replace Obamacare. There's no doubt. But just watch the way he interacts with the issue and talks about it. It's clearly not his number one priority. He wants to get it done to get it done. It's been a big priority of conservatives like mine and others who understand what a disaster it is. But by getting past it, he can get to an issue like immigration or tax reform where he is in his sweet spot. Find me a Republican that's going to oppose what Donald Trump wants to do on enforcing our border and our immigration laws. And I'm going to find you somebody who will face, if they face a stick, will face a very real challenge. Same with fundamental tax reform. Find me a Republican that's against cutting taxes, simplifying your brackets, and I will find you someone who's not a real Republican. And I'm not an excommunicator. I don't live in the land where, hey, if you don't do this, you're not a real Republican. But if Republicans don't stand for tax cuts, then what the hell do they stand for? So he's going to be on more fertile ground going forward. And I like the fact that he said, hey, we're having a vote and we're moving on. We're moving on to the Senate, or we're moving on altogether. It's going to be a very interesting day. I would stay peeled to this program as well as the Fox News channel as you and Fox News Radio with the real-time developments, because this is going to change faster than people understand. And it really is. It was funny. I was watching another network, very fake news network this morning before really early, and they were already writing the obituary for this bill. It's over. It's done. What's he going to do when he loses? And you know what? They may not get to the threshold. They really may not. But they just might. They just might. There's a crucible of time pressure. There is a stick that Trump can wield and will wield. He's not afraid. And so I think in that sense, while it's an imperfect bill, we should not write it off now, because there's still plenty of time, many, many hours before this goes to a vote in the House of Representatives. This is Kilmeade and Friends. We're going to keep talking about this issue, about London, about surveillance. Want your calls. We're going to get back to them for sure. 1-866-408-7669. Stick with us.
Broadcasting from the #1 news network in North America, it's the show for the next generation of Americans. It's Kilmeade and Friends.
We are not afraid, and our resolve will never waver in the face of terrorism. Democracy will always prevail.
This is the thing that keeps me up at night, worrying about where is the person who may be bent on the next San Bernardino, the next Orlando attack.
For 7.5 years, we have been promising the American people that we will repeal and replace this broken law, and tomorrow we're proceeding.
Where are you now, sir? I'm still unknown. Why? Because we haven't been able to reach a point where the healthcare market is actually going to improve.
They're scrambling to find a bill that they can pass on the floor. I don't know if you want to call this, on Trump's part, a rookie's error.
To me, it's clear that I would be concerned if I was the president. And that's why I wanted him to know, and I felt like I had a duty and obligation to tell him.
To have our chairman take evidence that he received perhaps in the dead of night and not bring it to the committee was just a complete head-scratcher.
Was there an intent to abuse the listening in on the foreigners and improperly listen in on Americans? In the absence of a court order, you don't go listening in on American citizens.
America's solutions are discussed here.
Welcome to Kilmeade and Friends. My name is Pete Hegseth, your humble co-host. I was gonna confuse my words there. Been talking so much. I don't know how Brian Kilmeade does it. I just sit in once in a while for him, and I'm already smoked. But you are a fantastic audience. Your calls have already been pouring in. They're lighting up the board, and I think they're indicative of the fact that this country's having a big debate right now, especially conservatives, especially Republicans, and it's happening right here on Kilmeade and Friends as well. Keep your calls coming this morning. 1-866-408-7669. The number is 866-408-7669. Listen, from what's happened in London and terror attacks to the surveillance and the new revelations from the House Intel Committee coming today, but especially Obamacare, Republicans and conservatives are having a gigantic conversation about what it means to be a Republican, what it means to be a conservative, what it means to repeal and replace, whether we're doing enough, whether we should be doing more, whether you should be backing the president because of his entire agenda, or we should treat Obamacare and its repeal as a standalone issue. We get to talk about it. We get to debate it. But our next guest, Representative Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee's 7th District, well, she's got to live it and she's got to vote on it. So, Representative, thanks for joining us this morning. And I really want to get your take. Peel back the curtain right now. Capitol Hill is a hotbed of activity. What is your take on sort of the current state of the repeal and replace effort?
Oh, I tell you, Pete, I think that what you're seeing is a movement toward a yes vote. The amendment that was filed overnight that just cleared the Rules Committee, which eliminates the essential health benefits from the federal mandates and moves that back to the states, where it will be more closely watched. That is something that conservatives have wanted to see. We're always wanting to move money, power, authority out of Washington, D.C. and back to local and state governments and to the taxpayers' pocket, letting them make their own decisions. So that's a significant step. Also in the bill, Section 112 carries the language that I'd submitted to halt the expansion of Medicaid, the Medicaid expansion. It would halt that. States that are in the program would be in the program. States that did not expand Medicaid would not be allowed to go into that program. So that is a significant win for conservatives. Two other points that I would make. Block granting the Medicaid money back to the states, that is something conservative legislators have seen. I've talked to so many of my Tennessee legislators, and they chalk that up as a big win. And then also allowing them to have work requirements, be able to put work requirements on able-bodied adults who are getting benefits. That is something that they have sought from the federal government. It gives the power to them. The pro-life language that is in this bill, there again, language I'd worked on. The select panel that I chaired last year that investigated what was happening with some of the abortion providers and the selling of fetal tissues, blocking money from going to those abortion entities. That is an enormous conservative win, and the language is so strong that National Right to Life has come out in favor of this bill, and they're actually scoring a yes vote.
Well, Representative, you just laid out, I think, the most cogent sort of conservative argument, the changes that have been made, the reasons why this is a bill that's worth voting yes for to repeal and replace. But as you know, you still have colleagues of yours, members of the Freedom Caucus, but other elements of the Republican Party that are still a no vote. So even after all of those changes, if you were to sit down, and maybe you will today, with a few of those members and have a face-to-face conversation, what are you saying to them? What is your, because clearly the policy isn't enough for them right now if there's still a no vote based on all those changes. What's your sell to get them to yes?
I tell them that, no bill is ever going to be perfect. And when we go in there, we're going to have a choice, as President Trump said. It will be, if the bill fails, then we've got Obamacare. And if we want to start to roll this back, then this is the shot that we've got today. And I have to tell you, I know, Pete, you know Dave Ramsey, my neighbor and constituent, and he's always talking about getting yourself out of debt and doing the snowball effect. And I really appreciate thinking that direction as we look at this bill. We're going to take the things that we can do through reconciliation and start to build that snowball and roll ourselves back to economic freedom and getting the federal government out of health care. And that's what we want to do.
Do you feel, I mean, it's still, so I don't want to play the blame game or look backwards, because I know today's a date about moving it forward and trying to get to the magic 216 that you guys want to get to. But in this case, do you feel like there was some disservice done to the Trump administration by leadership in their characterization of how much support their plan would have? I think President Trump ran into more resistance than he anticipated and now finds himself personally on Capitol Hill whipping for votes, which isn't usually what a president is doing this directly this soon. So were you surprised by the extent of the resistance to this? And if so, could there have been a better rollout or characterization of this?
I think that what there could have been, we have to go back and look at the fact that any successful communications or marketing plan is going to establish the predicate or prep the battle space, as you would say, Pete, and where you lay out why you are doing something. And quite frankly, I don't think that happened. We went November, December, January, and really didn't talk much about the Republican replacement plan on health care and how we were going to turn to patient-centered health care.
But critics would say we had 7 years to do that. Critics would say we had,
I'm totally in agreement with you, and I've continued to talk about my provisions for this, a cross-state line purchase of health insurance, my bill, H.R. 314, and I go back to 2010 with the Blair House Summit, where I talked about that provision. And, members needed to be doing more and talking about what we were going to do, what we wanted to see happen. And that wasn't done. There wasn't a plan in how it was going to be rolled out. The bill just materialized, and then people started talking about it. We should learn from this that we need to be more well-organized before a bill comes out.
Sure. Now, either way, and I love this, that President Trump said, enough. We're going to vote up or down, take it or leave it. I don't think in your time in Congress, how many times have you seen very consequential votes like this truly come to the floor without a real understanding until the last minute of whether it's going to pass or fail? I mean, usually it's teed up to the point where they don't bring it to the floor until they know they have the votes, right?
Well, and I think what we know is every once in a while they will take something to the floor before they're sure, but they think that the things are trending that way. Today, I do think that this is trending the way. I'm getting emails. Here's one right now. I'll just read it to you. Marcia, help get Republicans on board. This must go through. We have had enough. We, the people, want Obamacare out now. If we're not going to start the process now, then when? And that is an email that just popped up on my screen from one of my constituents. And I think people don't like the bickering. As my mother said, people need to stop this fussing in public.
Moms are wise. Moms are wise. So let's say the bill does pass, that you're correct, and or let's say it fails. Either way, he said, hey, we're either moving on to the Senate or we're moving on. Where would you like to see the Trump administration go next? Would it be immigration? Would it be fundamental tax reform? Those both appear to be more fertile ground where it's going to be even more difficult for Republicans to sort of go against what President Trump has said he wants to do.
I think we need to do tax reform next. because I think it is important for individuals to see that these marginal rates are going to come down. It is important for them to know that they're going to have a simplified tax filing process. It is important for businesses to have certainty. You know, I talk to our employers in my district, which is primarily a small business district, and, you know, Pete, they say to me repeatedly, can you just please provide some certainty? If you all will just make your mind up and not have to go back every year, and we get these changes and you call the IRS and they can't give you the appropriate guidance, and then you're having to pay for another 2 or 3 hours of your accountant's time to figure this out. Just give us some certainty. So I hope that we do taxes next. Then I hope we go to regulatory reform and broadband expansion, which is something that I'm helping to drive.
Part of the infrastructure conversation going on.
That's it.
Thank you for taking it. It's a busy day for you and everyone on Capitol Hill. We're watching the floor right now live on Fox. Lots of conversations continue, still ongoing, and I know you'll be a part of it. Representative Marsha Blackburn, thank you for your time, and good luck tonight on the vote.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You got it. All right. On the other side of this break, we are going to be taking your calls to continue this conversation. What do you think of what the representative had to say? What do you think of the chances of this thing passing? Kilmeade and Friends, 1-866-408-7669. Taking your calls on the other side.
Holding our politicians' feet to the fire, no matter who they are. That's Kilmeade and Friends.
They're scrambling to find a bill that they can pass on the floor. I don't know if you want to call this, on Trump's part, a rookie's error, but you don't find a day and say we're going to pass a bill. You may be a great negotiator. Rookie's error for bringing this up on a day when clearly you're not ready.
Well, I would say there was a rookie's error when we had to pass a bill to find out what's in it, but that's just one man's opinion. That was, of course, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi doing, you know, the best she can to scuttle anything and everything that the Trump administration would ever be for, regardless of the merits. Not really a loyal opposition, just part of the resistance that she cannot in any way move past. So no surprise with those words. We're going to go to the phone lines. In the break, I was reading the failing New York Times, which is here, and it just gets my blood pressure going. I may be on the other side of this break. I think I'm going to do the first installment of A Reading from the failing New York Times, and I'll do some interpretive voices and others because it's too good. It's too rich. The stuff that they come up with that purports to be journalism or things that they think they're breaking ground on that the rest of us have realized forever, but you can't get through the head of a skinny jean latte wearing New York Times reporter here in Manhattan. But I digress. So stick around for a reading from the failing New York Times. First, we're going to go to the phones though to talk about healthcare and your comments. They're pouring in. Jack in Orlando, you've been patient on the line. Give me your take on the repeal effort.
Oh, well, you know, it needs to be repealed and replaced because it is just something that is just out of whack. And I'll just give you a real firm example. I worked for the post office. My daughter was allowed to be on my health care till 22 as long as she showed that she was in college. At 22, she was kicked off. She got married, she bought a house, and she came to me at 25 and said, hey, the new health care law allows me to go into your health care. And I said, no, you can't go on my health care. You know, that's wrong.
So you feel like, and that's still in this bill, correct? I mean, it's not gone.
I mean, she had a mortgage. Her and her husband were allowed to go back on my health care, and guess what happened? My health care premium started going up. Nobody has taken a thought of what goes on when the people in the insurance business lose the cheaper insured people.
Yeah.
And put it on the older people. And, you know, it's absolutely ludicrous that your child's 26, married, and you're allowed to go on your parents' insurance.
Jack, what all that common sense? What about all the snowflakes that just they need it? You know, you got to be looking out for them. So good old-fashioned common sense from Jack in Orlando. Thank you for the call, Jack. I very much appreciate it. We're going to go to Susan in Portland, has some thoughts on the repeal effort as well.
want to say really quick, I loved your interview with Mark Levin. You were so professional. It was amazing. Now, getting to this bill, everybody, I'm a truck driver. We're really, really unhappy with this Paul Ryan and his situation. He's trying to take one broken bill, replace it with another. He should have consulted the Freedom Caucus and everyone. He totally blew it. As far as this pre-existing condition, we don't want this. You wouldn't allow a person to get automobile insurance that had wrecked cars, wrecked vehicles, and come in and pay the same rates. You know, I feel bad for people that have pre-existing conditions. It's not going to work. It's not going to be financially feasible. Another thing, I know your other caller, Jack, touched on this covering kids till they're 26. First of all, they're not kids. When they turn 18, they're adults. Yeah. I got married when I was 16 years old, had a child. I bought my first home at 19. I am a hardworking American like many, many, many of us. We don't want another failed medical bill. I'm really unhappy with Trump for trying to push this through.
So, Susan, all that said,
Ryan through.
No, I think those are fantastic points. You've laid it out very well. In fact, many of the critiques are the same critiques the Freedom Caucus are making of this bill. So if you were a congresswoman, would you vote for the bill today?
Absolutely not. It would get a complete no stamp on it. They need to do it right. They need to present something right. I hope they move on to bigger and better things, tax reform, all the other things that need to be done, work on the wall, many, many things that they need to take care of, but definitely no, get this fixed. Ryan needs to quit being on a power trip. He needs to consult everyone. I knew this was going to be a blow-up with him. I'm sorry. He's has a track record of not being a team player.
Well, Susan, thank you for the call. Very interesting points, and that's the voice of the resistance that Trump is facing right now as he tries to get this across the finish line. A lot of legitimate points from people who have said, hey, we wanted people to actually repeal this thing for real, and yet there's these hanging chads of issues that we've had issues with that are still in the bill. Why is that? That'll make it a sticking point till the very end, no doubt. We've got time for one more quick call. David in Georgia, what do you got?
Hey, Pete. Real quick, there's a simple solution for Congress to fix this replacement thing with Obamacare, and that is Congress should give the American people the same insurance that they have. We'd be done with it. But they don't want that. They want to pass legislations that we have to abide by, but they're too good to have to fall under living by what we have.
Well, isn't that the truth, David? No, I appreciate the call. You're exactly right. There's another bill pending in Congress right now that I love. Make every member of Congress get the same health care as veterans at the VA. How quickly would the VA be fixed? That terrible example of single-payer health care and what it's done to our veterans. They love to vote other things for other people, but never wanted to apply to themselves. I love that idea, and I think true reformers someday, maybe this president himself later on, will get a chance to enact something like that. Smart callers, as always, here in Kilmeade and Friends. We're going to keep going to the phone lines. 1-866-408-7669. What are your thoughts as we tick-tock to this big vote in the House of Representatives? Stick around.
That makes you think. It's Kilmeade and Friends.
I think it's fine for them to delay this. They're talking about they got to do it tomorrow. Why do they have to do it tomorrow? It's better to do it right than it is to do it quickly. I think move on to tax reform. I wish they'd have done that first. That's going to stir the economy a whole lot more than anything they do with the health care bill, and they need to make sure they get it right. I don't think they've got it quite right yet. If they did, they'd have a better, broader consensus of Republicans on board with it.
It's broadly unpopular, or the bill, it's broadly unpopular. People don't know about it, and they already don't like it. So the thing for Trump is, if this becomes a weeks-long ordeal to try to get this back on track, and you're really doing all of this, you're going to see a lot of air go out of the balloon. I would say if you're going to fail fast.
So that first clip was Mike Huckabee on O'Reilly last night, basically saying it's okay to delay it, get it right. And then that's one side of the view on the repeal of Obamacare. The other one is what Chris Stirewalt had to say about it on Special Report. He said, if you're going to fail fast. And it appears that President Trump is going the Stirewaltian direction, if you will, by saying we're having a vote today, come hell or high water. I want to know where you stand, and then I'm moving on. I'm either moving on to get it passed in the Senate, or I'm moving on to other things. he feels like a delay is just going to have this thing dragging out. We're going to go back to the phone lines here in a second here on Kilmeade and Friends. Some great calls this morning, fantastic calls on all sides of this issue. I think truly bringing out the different views that Republicans and conservatives have. But, I've been reading the failing New York Times in the break, and I did say that I'm going to introduce a new segment called the interpretive reading of the failing New York Times. Because, listen, I look at the newspaper every single day, and every day there's something so patently absurd that it would pass as journalism in this country. It truly is. If it's not fake news, it's sort of faux news. It's so biased that it's sad and funny at the same time. In this particular brief, I'm going to do a brief reading because I'm going to come more prepared next time I guest host with my best nugget of the interpretive reading of the failing New York Times, because this is just knee jerk. But on the front page, there's a story about the global toll from the attacker born in Britain. So the attack in London was done by a Brit, but folks from a Mormon couple from Utah, as we know, South Korean tourists, French high schoolers, Romanian lovers were the ones wounded or killed by this attacker. And it's all part of the song the New York Times sings about the global community that we're in. It goes into the second paragraph by saying, and I quote, "The killer turned out to be homegrown. A 52-year-old Briton, Khalid Massoud, who had a criminal record but was not on any police monitoring lists." And then they include this interlude. "The Islamic State, which rejects peace and coexistence, described Mr. Massoud on Thursday as a disciple." Did you really have to give me that? Did you have to clarify that the Islamic State rejects peace and coexistence? Have you not been alive for the last 2 years? I know you guys love coexistence and love peace, but you'd never do what's necessary to actually confront it. It goes on in the article to say, "The authorities have been emphasizing that they thought the assailant had acted alone and that they did not expect any further attacks, but they raided 6 properties across the country, detaining 8 people in London and Birmingham." So happy to spew this idea that he acted alone. He's just a misguided soul. Oh, but there were a bunch of raids and they captured a bunch of people, because someone like this usually doesn't act alone or without their family or other friends or religious leaders knowing about their descent into radicalization. Again, the longer we have our eyes closed, the deeper and darker this threat will continue to be. So I'm going to count that as a very humble and meager attempt at the first reading from the failing New York Times, but future editions, I'm going to come at you more robustly and with an even better interpretive voice. In the meantime, skip the New York Times and just listen to Kilmeade and Friends and Fox and Friends to get the latest on all things happening in the world. But we're going to go to the phone lines, back to Obamacare and the attempted repeal. What do conservative and Republicans think? Suzanne in North Carolina, you've got a take. What do you got for us?
Well, good day. It's an honor to speak with you, and thank you for your service to our country. I think that they should repeal it, period. Repeal, and there is no replacement. Let the market take over. Let the states run Medicaid and Medicare as necessary. And I think that it will correct itself.
Well, it was a repeal, right? It was a repeal before it was a replace. Why do you? Is it purely politics, Suzanne? Is that why? So the lack of a gut and of courage of members, because some people will lose their coverage, government-sponsored coverage. Is that why they won't do that?
I guess it's politics, but I think that most people would rather that they not. I mean, Washington, D.C. does not know what's good for it. Let the patients and the doctors take over. I just think it's
well, like you said, let the free market work.
Correct.
Let the free market work. Let consumers interact with choices and competition, which we all know leads to driving prices down. The insurance lobby has got their hands all over this, which I think is another fair critique of it. Even if a yes vote means we're getting rid of some portions of it, it's still a very distorted market. Suzanne, I appreciate the call, but one of the other challenges is that it takes a while for the free market to reassert itself when there's been so many fingers on the scale in different directions distorting the market. But I think a very, very fair point from Suzanne. Derek in Indiana, you've got another take.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne, for your point of view, because I work in the front lines. I'm an office manager, a service line manager for a medium-sized healthcare network, and we have patients, that come to us all the time. Our doctors are really wanting to help them and really have a solution for them. And then when we turn to the insurance, which I feel like is the elephant in the room here, is they tie our hands as to what we can order or what we can do, or make us jump through so many hoops just to try to get coverage for the poor people that are suffering from their conditions. So sure. I'm in support of that, moving the power from the federal to the state and giving that free market option. But like you said, if it takes a while for that free market to establish itself, my concern is what are the payers doing in the background? Yeah. If they loosen their grasp and they allow...
Well, they don't want it. Is that the reason why, say, even something as simple as buying across state lines, the insurance industry has such a grip, lobby has such a grip on the sort of quasi-monopolies they have that they won't let it go? I mean, it seems like such common sense.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, once they make something that's profitable, once they invest themselves into, imagine if you were them playing the devil's advocate. I mean, you're being told that you have to take on all these people that aren't necessarily going to pay or at subsidized.
Sure,
rates,
you can't adjust them risk-wise because they're coming in with pre-existing conditions.
That's correct. And so then they have to force what other people can and cannot seek out anyhow. So Obamacare is going to fail for those people that I deal with people that have long-term GI symptoms all the time. And some of these infusions cost $16,000 to $21,000 a piece for every 8 weeks for the rest of their life. And so when we're trying to get that covered and show that these people need them, there's many times they throw us through the hoops that we can't even get the care that they need, or it's so delayed that it's no longer a benefit to the patient, and they know that. So in this bill, if we're loosening that up, bringing that back to the states, the people that have to go with it are also the insurance, and say, okay, so if we're not mandated to cover all these other people or to do this thing that the federal law is mandating us, we need to, and they need to be able to come back and say, hey, okay, we will be able to cover this because we're not as burdened as we were before.
So, Derek, you clearly know your stuff, and there's some good and there's some bad. If you were a member of Congress right now, based on what you know, would you vote for this repeal?
I would, yes, but I'm a little ignorant in it. I wish there was more information about what's going on behind, maybe the closed doors. If there's an ability to preview that, to have someone, even the media, Fox, to say, hey, look, these are some of the major bullet points. This is what we know, especially when it comes to the insurance. I am worried about lobbyists. I am worried about what is in their best interest. But at the same time, if it truly is a free market and it truly allows us to choose, then the competition needs to go back to Anthem, and we as patients need to be able to stand up and say, payers need to stand up and say, well, I'm going to choose this insurance company instead of that one.
Of course, competition. Derek, thanks for the call and the information. You're right. If we're going to pass this bill, we need to make sure folks know what's in it before we pass it, lest we fall into the same trap that Nancy Pelosi did, and you get a bunch of unintended consequences that no one wants to take responsibility for. A great call, Derek. We're going to go to Fred in Lake, I'm going to butcher this, Lake Havasu, Arizona. Havasu, Arizona. I hope I got that right. And you've got, the previous caller talked about, we don't know what's in it. I think you're making a similar critique.
Well, yeah, I am. The Republicans on everything have a lot of people that talk, but they don't communicate. And that's what's wrong here. Is that Ryan and others are not communicating what's in the bill. And the previous caller hit the nail on the head. They should be telling us what's in the bill that they have. There are probably some very good points, and there are probably some that aren't so good. Okay, but they're not telling us. Now, if we were to move on to tax reform, they're not going to communicate that either. Or in the immigration, they have a failure to communicate, as to bring back.
Why do you think? You think that's intentional, or do you think they don't have great communicators, or do you think, hey, the more information we put out there, we muddy the waters? I mean, what's the reason for that?
No, the reason for that is, I think all three. They simply don't have good communicators. Ryan, for instance, talks at 1,000 words a second, and you can't understand what he's saying. They got to get people up there with some credibility to explain what's in these major pieces of legislation. And platitudes, and it's a great bill.
The talking points and all that, save it. You're exactly right. What help does that do for anybody? Fred, I'm going to jump to one more call, but I want to get your take. Would you vote for this bill as it's currently structured?
Well, as much as I don't know what's in it, I'd have to say I would probably say no.
Okay.
I would probably say no because I don't know enough about it.
Well, that's a fair point. If you don't know what's in it, how are you going to vote for it? And hopefully, members of Congress have even more information, but they're busy too. So, Fred, I'm just kind of taking an informal poll with every call. That's good to know. Appreciate the call, Mike in Pennsylvania. We've only got a minute here, but what are your thoughts?
Hi, Brian. Yeah, so hopefully they're thinking about this and mulling it around. You know, if they talk about the pre-existing conditions and whether or not people should pay more if they have a pre-existing condition, what they have to look at is it a correctable pre-existing condition? What I mean is, you know, if you have a disease and they say to you, okay, you are overweight, and if you lose weight, these things will go away. But if you choose to continue with your poor eating habits and stay obese, then you should be charged a higher premium.
Wait, are you talking about personal responsibility?
Yes.
How dare you do that?
What?
I'm being sarcastic. I mean, of course, you've got a system right now where people aren't being held responsible, told to walk in and say, regardless of what you've done to your own body or your own circumstances, somebody's going to be on the hook to pay for it.
Absolutely, and you should be. If you're a smoker and your doctor says you should not be smoking, this is what's happening to you. It's increasing your heart disease. It's increasing your trips into the emergency department. You have to quit smoking. Well, I choose to continue to smoke. Well, then pay for it.
Yeah. Mike, if you're a congressman, are you voting for this bill?
Well, listen, I don't know all the details. I don't know what what the fine points are. I would have to say at this point, yes, it's got to be better than what we have, not knowing everything.
Sure. Well, it's better than you're saying, hey, I may not know everything, but it's not Obamacare, and I know what a disaster Obamacare is. Mike, thanks for the call. We've got even more calls coming in. Keep them coming. 1-866-408-7669. I'm going to get to even more on the other side of the break. But isn't it interesting that people with making smart points as conservatives on both sides, some are coming down yes, some are coming down no. I think it's very indicative of the sausage making happening on Capitol Hill right now. More analysis on the other side of this break.
If you've got an opinion, don't keep it to yourself. Dial 866-408-7669 and share it with the world. Kilmeade and Friends.
Say, the folks pulling the music, they got deeper tracks than I do. I have to ask who some of these songs are. I mean, I'm a 90s rap guy, but not a connoisseur. So, gentlemen, get it under control over there, you know? Keep it stuff that your humble guest host might actually know. No, I love it. Great music when we got a guest host here on Kilmeade and Friends. My name's Pete Hegseth, your humble guest host, and we've been taking your calls all morning about Obamacare and this vote that's forthcoming in the House. The Rules Committee there's already activity on the House. If you turn your television to Fox News Channel, you'll see it. And the debate we're having right now on the air, I think very similar to probably what's happening behind closed doors on Capitol Hill. We're going to go to Frank in Utica, New York. Frank, what are your thoughts?
Thanks for letting me on, Pete. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I just want to say about this bill, they know that the president wants it. I believe in backing the president. And also, most of the good Republicans that aren't running a conspiracy against them, they want it. So I would vote for it and find out what's in it later.
Well, so you would vote for it in order, why, just because you want to, do unto them what was done unto Republicans?
Exactly. You know they don't like it and they don't want it, so I wouldn't even have to read it. I just vote for it.
Well, that's a healthy, vindictive nature, Frank. I don't know if the country would benefit necessarily from that, but I get where you're coming from. I also like the idea from a previous caller, I think it was on a different hour, that said, why don't we have another vote on Obamacare, the same bill that they passed in 2010, and see how many Democrats want to vote for that right now. I think you'd probably see a bit of a different vote count, which would be quite revealing. So thanks for the call. If vindictive, Frank from Utica. Appreciate it. We're going to go to Enrique from Arizona. What are your thoughts?
I want to know in this bill how it's going to cover the ethics of the medical industry. I'll give you an example. I just had a CAT scan. They charged the company $14,000. I don't blame this on the insurance company. I blame it when I look at my cell phone, which has much more technology in it than CAT scans that have been around for 30 years, or when I had to get a prescription where my copay was going to be $300, but I was able to get it over Mexico for $85 over the counter. When I see these things, I wonder how is this bill, as much as I believe in a market-driven thing,
sure,
I also think that ethics have to be covered also. And I think there's a lot in our medical industry, not the doctors, not those people there, but those who bring the technology around that are gouging, and that's making insurance rates go up too. And as much as they try to negotiate, I don't think that the fairness is being covered. And
a consumer, you're not actually able to be given a real choice. I mean, there's no transparency on that cost or on that process, which, as you said, gets incredibly inflated because the cost is hidden from the user, and so the user doesn't care what they're paying, which means the insurance company doesn't care what they're charging, and the reimbursement rates all get inflated, and it gets more expensive for everybody. I think your point is very well taken because I follow this closely. I'm not a healthcare wonk, but I've looked at what Paul Ryan has laid out, and it's still difficult to truly understand where you're going to get that much more transparency in cost and pricing and transparency in the choices the consumer gets so as to ensure that you make sure these prices come down in a way that's consistent with the market. I know it's in there. I know there's probably some wonkier ways to say that and understand it, but if a guy like me who's following this fairly closely still doesn't understand every answer on that, you can understand some of the angst on Enrique, just real quick, would you vote yes or no tonight?
No, I wouldn't.
You'd vote no. Okay. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. We've only got 30 seconds here. I'm going to go to Charlie in Detroit. What are your thoughts?
I have a question. Who pays for the people, whether they're citizens or non-citizens in America, for any type of medical care?
Well, a lot of people go to the emergency room.
That's right. It's not the government.
Yeah.
If you figure out who's paying for it, think outside the box. I love Mike Pence, but mandating or block granting to the states is more insanity.
Well, we're going to find out. Would you be an up or a down, Charlie, on the vote tonight?
Absolutely down. It involves government.
There you go. Hey, you're hearing it from all sides. You're hearing up, you're hearing down. We wrapped yet another hour of Kilmeade and Friends. A lot of fun. We're going to keep talking about healthcare, but also developments on wiretapping as well as the attacks in London. A lot of news. Stick with us on Kilmeade and Friends.
Broadcasting from the #1 news network in North America, it's the show for the next generation of Americans. It's Kilmeade and Friends.
We are not afraid, and our resolve will never waver in the face of terrorism. Democracy will always prevail.
This is the thing that keeps me up at night, worrying about where is the person who may be bent on the next San Bernardino, the next Orlando attack.
For 7.5 years, we have been promising the American people that we will repeal and replace this broken law, and tomorrow we're proceeding.
Where are you now, sir? I'm still unknown. Why? Because we haven't been able to reach a point where the healthcare market is actually going to improve.
They're scrambling to find a bill that they can pass on the floor. I don't know if you want to call this, on Trump's part, a rookie's error.
To me, it's clear that I would be concerned if I was the president. And that's why I wanted him to know, and I felt like I had a duty and obligation to tell him.
To have our chairman take evidence that he received perhaps in the dead of night and not bring it to the committee was just a complete head-scratcher.
Was there an intent to abuse the listening in on the foreigners and improperly listen in on Americans? In the absence of a court order, you don't go listening in on American citizens.
America's solutions are discussed here.
Welcome to a brand new hour on this Friday edition of Kilmeade and Friends. I am not Brian Kilmeade. I oftentimes wish I was, but I am today your humble guest host, Pete Hegseth. Just warming the mic, warming the seat for him as he takes a well-deserved day, a little bit of time, which he gets every once in a while. He worked one of the hardest working men in showbiz, and I get the opportunity to be with his audience for number of hours, and it's always an enjoyable experience. Your calls have been coming in, and we've had a long conversation this morning about what's going on unfolding before our eyes on Fox News Channel right now as President Trump has given Republicans an ultimatum: pass the GOP bill or live with Obamacare. That's the banner right now. Are they going to pass it or not? He said, the time for debate is over, and I want you to make a call. Nobody knows really what the whip count is on Capitol Hill, whether they can get to that magic number of 216. But we're going to try to press our next guest to give us his definitive answer, and we're going to hold him to it. His name is Chris Stirewalt. He's a politics editor for Fox News. He's on the line right now. Act, Chris, as my prognosticator here. Give me truth and light. Where is this vote going to go?
Well, if I were a Republican, I would hope that it would fail. Probably the worst thing at this point that could happen for Donald Trump or for his party would be to have to press ahead with this thing.
So you think the best outcome for Republicans is a fail?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Just because the path through the Senate is so thorny that they're just going to get stuck?
So this is bad legislation. I don't know. It's up to people who know a lot about health policy to decide whether they think it's good legislation or bad legislation from a policy point of view. From a political point of view, this is a dog. It's got 17% approval. It's substantially worse off than Obamacare was at the similar point. It is facing a process in the Senate that will be worse. It will consume many, many, many weeks of time dragging forward. It will get worse for conservatives, not better. And I don't think Trump cares about the bill that much. I don't think he likes it that much. I think he wants to do tax reform. I think he wants to do stimulus spending. I don't think he particularly cares about. I think he, and you already see the distancing. New York Times piece sourced at the White House. It's like, well, he regrets having trusted Paul Ryan on this.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it's the title of it is a brave front, but regrets ? He has a few. So do you think? I mean, you think in the back of his mind, in the back of his senior advisors, they're saying, okay, we're putting you on the record, we're going to vote, and then when Nancy Pelosi said we're going to tattoo this to you, well, the failure will then, if it doesn't pass, be tattooed to Paul Ryan. Do you think that's ultimately, hey, Paul Ryan, you failed us. You own this. Now we're moving on.
Right, and then when conservatives or whomever say no, now we need to do the real Obamacare, they say no, you had your chance, you couldn't do it, and we're moving on, and so you'll just keep Obamacare.
Just keep Obamacare, and well, President Trump doesn't want that. He can say he gave an earnest effort and then move on. Does this? But if he were to go down, it were not to pass. What does that do to his ability to get the other stuff done he wants to get done?
So he doesn't have a constituency per se in Congress. There is not a Trump core. He has a handful of members who really like him and who he likes, but there isn't, from an ideological point of view, there isn't this core group. So we'll have to see what's in the tax plan and how it lines up. I have been briefed on it, and I think that there will probably be a lot for conservatives to like, but also I think there'll be a lot that'll be very controversial.
Where does he run into problems there? Because I've assumed that tax reform is firmer ground for him amongst Republicans. If you're a Republican, how are you not for, consolidating brackets and simplifying the code, all the things that, fiscal conservatives have said they want? If there's one unifying effort, you'd think it would be that, but you still think there's lots of pitfalls there. Let me be naive for a moment.
Wait a minute. What would conservatives and what would Republicans like more than repealing Obamacare and replacing it with market-based solutions?
Yeah, but
we heard that for 8 years.
There's so many political pitfalls on. Yeah, we heard that for 8 years because it was an easy vote.
So are they on taxes. The number of pitfalls, the number of places. So let's take the home mortgage deduction. There's a lot of ways that you can flatten and make more fair and simplify the United States tax code. But each one of those things that you would take out, each deduction that you would take out, has huge constituencies, often powerful ones, backing them. So if you come for and say, we're going to do away with your mortgage deduction, how hard is that fight? And who's fighting it? And what side are you on? Look, I'm not saying that it can't be done. What I'm saying is, for Trump, he gave a try on this, and I think it's more likely to pass now than fail. but I think that passage could be painful because you're going to go into weeks and weeks and months of fighting over the particulars of healthcare policy.
Could he dual track it, work them simultaneously?
No.
It's not going to happen.
No, because one descends from the other. Because Obamacare replacement, Trump care is a tax bill. When you get right down to it, they're doing it as reconciliation. There are $900 billion or more in taxes over a decade in Obamacare. The Republicans want that money, right? Paul Ryan wants that money, and he wants to cut those taxes or as much of it as he can. So you could try to dual track it, but as we've seen with the effort to try to do this on Obamacare, the ability to walk and chew gum cannot be taken for granted.
No, it cannot. I'm struck, I think, by how much of this is driven by human interest stories, by people, by the charge that folks level against whatever this is called, Ryan Care, Trump Care, is who will lose their coverage, how many will lose their coverage. So you're saying the same human interest angle would exist on tax reform? Isn't that yes, mortgage deductions, things like that, they'll have constituencies, but they won't have the charge of you're taking away health care from people, which is what the left says on its charge against repealing Obamacare. On tax reform, don't you think Republicans can lock shields at the very least with some compromise to the point where it could get done?
So our tax code is thick because each one of those deductions has a constituency. Farmers, realtors, makers of electric cars, all of these. The reason it's complicated is because those deductions and those rules are all in there because somebody wanted them there.
There's a lobbyist for it. Yeah,
it's not just a lobbyist, but there's an interest group. When let's just take how about charitable giving? How about charitable giving? You remember what happened when Barack Obama said we should dial back, we should cap, essentially, the deductions on charitable giving?
Yeah.
It was an enormous freakout. But guess what? Here's the thing. It's probably good policy. It'd probably be good. It would be very painful and very disruptive for a lot of charities. But if what you wanted to, let me make it simple. The way that you make things better on large, complicated systems involves disruption and pain for certain individuals in the short term. Successful reforms, and we look back to 1981 for the last successful very large-scale tax reform, there was massive disruption and pain. The Republicans got spanked in the 82 midterms, but the reforms worked, and Reagan was reelected in a landslide. The question now, no one believes in this health law. The president doesn't believe in it. Ryan doesn't really believe in it. And this is a bastard child that nobody is particularly happy about. If they had something on health care that the president really believed in and would really sell, and that Ryan really believed in, and that Mitch McConnell believed in, and they pushed, they could do it. But what I'm telling you is that there will be people who will not be happy with it, and it will be a fight.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think the deficit you're speaking to is effectively political courage. But you really, in order to muster that type of courage, you have to really believe that what you're passing is going to have the intended effect you want. It's going to bring premiums down. It's going to, and as you talk to people who try to explain this bill, it's not clear that anyone can explain it very well in the first place, but also point to exactly how it saves the kind of money for either the consumer or the industry.
The purpose of Obamacare, clearly, plainly stated, was to expand insurance coverage, to bring premiums down. They had the talking points.
Yes.
What are the talking points on this? We got to repeal Obamacare because it's a disaster. What's the next talking point? Nothing.
I mean, it's choices is what I hear time and time again.
We hear choices, we hear those things, but what I'm saying is the raison d'etre, the whole, what's the point of Obamacare? We're going to cover these people. We're going to get coverage for these people. We're going to protect them. We're going to save them. And we're going to make these evil health insurance companies provide the care that people so desperately need. And it didn't work, and people were not satisfied with parts of it, but they had a rallying cry. In this case, the Republicans' rallying cry is Obamacare stinks.
Yeah, it's true. But even on another plane, it is the perpetual problem that conservatives face when you're arguing with a liberal. They're arguing a program or something tangible they want to give you. You're arguing the hidden hand of a market that's going to lead to incentives and competition that magically lowers prices and benefits the consumer.
And this ain't even that.
And this ain't even that is the challenge that you bring up on this. It's okay. So if you had to bet, I know you think it's better for Republicans that it not pass. Do you think it passes?
I think it's more likely to pass now than it was 24 hours ago.
Okay, just arm twisting.
Well, no, not arm twisting, because now this is it. And the conservatives know that whatever comes out of this at the end will be worse than this, but they also know that if they don't pass this, what will result in the end will be the permanent maintenance of Obamacare and subsidies and da-da-da-da-da.
And the question is, do you go back to your district standing on principle, or do you go back to say, hey, I didn't like it, I held my nose, but I voted with the president to get rid of Obamacare? I guess that's a calculation each member makes on their own. All right. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. As always, great insight. We'll be watching it. Chris Stirewalt, politics editor for Fox News Channel. Appreciate it. All right, we'll have more Kilmeade and Friends on the other side of the break. More of your phone calls on this issue, but we're also going to expand back to the London terror attacks, as well as new breaking information on surveillance, what Devin Nunes said this morning that is moving the ball down the field on what he knows, what the NSA might be revealing. We'll be talking about that and taking your phone calls, 1-866-408-7669.
There was additional unmasking that was done in the documents that I read the other day. I don't know who asked for them to be unmasked. I just know that there are more. Now, just so you know, I was aware of the unmasking before I read the documents.
That is House Intel Chairman Devin Nunes just off the House floor this morning, just moments ago. New comments on the revelations that he had earlier this week to the White House and to the press, and now to the remainder of the Intel Committee about basically whistleblowers or others that have come to him with information that there was indeed surveillance of the Trump transition between November, December, and January, and that he has the evidence of it. Not a whole lot there, not a big new nugget, but a recognition that the unmasking is at the centerpiece of this. Making the fact that names were revealed and then disseminated amongst intelligence officials is really the problematic aspect of. I mean, surveillance is too, but all of that could have been captured in a legal way and then disseminated illegally by an unmasking that was unnecessary, which becomes a big part of the problem. He also went on to say that Paul Manafort, who's been at the center of a lot of these so-called Russian connections, he's agreed to be invited by the committee. So Paul Manafort may go before the House Intel Committee to talk about what he knows. Of course, there were reports earlier this week from the Associated Press that Manafort was paid multiple millions of dollars between 2006 and 2009 to lobby on behalf of a Russian billionaire. So the whole, if you watch it closely, again, it's confusing and convoluted. It's all Russia and wiretapping and leaks but what's become clear is that there still isn't any connection at all, proven connection at all of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. No evidence there. They were going to continue to investigate, and they should, because there's clearly an attempt by Russia to influence the election or the perception of our democracy. That's very different, or even benefit Hillary Clinton. But there's undermine Hillary Clinton, but there's no evidence that there was collusion between the two. Now there seems to be on the other side of the charge evidence that there was surveillance, potentially politically motivated, after then candidate Trump was elected and was President-elect Trump at Trump Tower. Man, a lot more to happen here. Where this goes, I'm not sure, and whether or not we can get a real valid and fair assessment of the facts. We may live in an era where fake news is ubiquitous and agendas are all over the place, but you still want to believe at the end of the day we can get to some facts and some evidence that points to whether or not something happened. Some have suggested it'll require subpoenas before committees to get the truth from former Obama administration officials who could have been involved with unmasking, who could have been involved with ordering whatever sort of surveillance occurred. And you don't want to believe that career intelligence officials are doing this. More likely it's something that a political operative type would be scheming or using legitimately gain information to game the system. It's going to be, in fact, we'll go to a caller on this real quick. Todd in Plaistow, I may be butchering it. I apologize if I am, in New Hampshire. You've got some thoughts on James Comey and his role in this investigation.
Thanks a lot, Pete. I appreciate you taking the call. Absolutely. There's many reasons that Comey has to go, but I think there's two specific things that he said on Monday which really kind of woke me up to this. He went on that rant about classified information and how important and this and that, but yet during the Hillary investigation, we all know what happened there. But the most important one was when he wouldn't commit to investigating the leakers. I thought was absurd, because what's going to come out today actually speaks directly to the leakers. And it just doesn't add up. There's so many things that he's politicized, but that thing that he just went off on the other day about not committing, to investigating the leakers, and then now this stuff is coming out. This is not going to be good for Comey if this is going the direction we think it's going.
Yeah,
it's time for Trump to pull the trigger.
Well, Todd, and we found out in looking at all this, the FBI is being very non-responsive to the House Intel Committee, too. I mean, the NSA is playing ball, producing these documents today that the committee's going to review over the weekend into early next week, but the FBI not so much. So, interesting point, Todd. Thanks a lot. We'll go to Gerard in Long Island. We've only got a minute here, Gerard. What are your thoughts?
Hey, how are you, sir? Just about Nunes. He jumped the gun again today without the NSA coming out with more information. He just rehashed exactly what he said the other day. I love Nunes. He has got Donald Trump's back, but he should have waited. And just on Comey just now, I heard your previous caller. Let me ask you something, Pete. Ain't it a crime to leak?
Yes.
Ain't it the FBI director's duty to find the leaker? And how does he have a say in the matter? Well, it's his obligation as the FBI director to look into a felony. And why doesn't he do it? And why don't the Republicans hold his feet to the fire?
Gerard, a lot of great questions there. Can't argue with you. Interesting stuff. And you're right. The politics of Nunes and what he talks about and when he talks about it, it's going to matter, even though the substance should matter a lot more. Keep your calls coming. 1-866-408-7669. Lots to discuss in the back half of this hour.
Commentary, no agenda. You're with Kilmeade and Friends.
Yes, you are. My name is Pete Hegseth, your humble guest host on this Friday edition of Kilmeade and Friends. The phone calls have been pouring in because there's a lot to talk about. And the number is 1-866-408-7669. I'm watching dual screens here in the studio, and it's all Capitol Hill on two big issues. The first is Obamacare and the vote that's coming tonight. We're going to talk more about that. But first, I want to get to a couple of calls on the line who've been waiting patiently to talk about, the recent developments on surveillance, on what the House Intelligence Chairman is saying about it, what they may or may not know, and some calls from folks who are fired up on one side or the other of, hey, was the president, after he was elected, surveilled? And what does that say about the Obama presidency, but as well as our intelligence services and the investigation that's ongoing? I'm going to go to Sid in Chicago. Sid, what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are pretty simple. I think we need to stay away from conjecture and focus on factual information. We know that there was a FISA warrant, and that warrant wasn't to surveil Trump or people involved in his campaign. It was a warrant that was basically designed to survey other people or surveil other people. If you talk with somebody who's under surveillance by the FBI or the NSA or whoever, your conversation is going to be made part of a record. Just because you talk to that person. And they're not surveilling you, they're surveilling that person.
Sure, but usually your name is not revealed. The name of the American is then not revealed.
Now, you're right. Now, that's an issue, but even in even that is being misconstrued when it's being reported. I listened to the hearing the other day, all 10 hours of it. And what they basically asked them was, who has the ability to go out and reveal those people's names? To pull them out, as instead of calling them person one, identify who person one is. Between the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, and other agencies, there are hundreds, nearly thousands of people who have access and basically control to do that within their designated agencies. So we can't sit back and say there were 20 people who had access to do this. Let's go investigate all 20 of them. No, there are a lot of people who had access to do that.
Which means
there probably is a leak that needs to be investigated. But we can't come back and say we can't fight the Democrats because Comey came out and said, we're investigating the Trump organization, the potential ties. There's an investigation on there. We can't sit back as Republicans and say, hey, you just made my group look bad, so now I've got to cling on anything that might even remotely make your group bad as a counterbalance.
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. You don't want it to be a tit for tat, but you do want it to be a search for the truth. And when you read something like the failing New York Times every single day, and every single day for a long time, there's conjecture, as to use your phrase, about collusion between the Russians and Team Trump without any evidence, but then a dismissal of a word like wiretap used by President Trump when the New York Times itself used wiretap in January 20th to describe what may or may not have been going on. I think you're right. I just want to get to the bottom of what was this incidental surveillance, what was captured, who was unmasked, and who did it. Because that does matter if it was done for political reasons, just like it does matter if somehow there was collusion between Trump, the Trump team, and the Russians, which has not been proved at all. So I think we probably share a similar frustration. You want these committees to be able to get in there and investigate it and find out. But I feel like so much of what's been done by our media is to use tidbits of conjecture to try to discredit Donald Trump. And so you got to treat the investigation into these leaks just as seriously as you would anything else.
Yeah, and I would agree, but it's a discrediting that's happening on both sides. If you come out and you find out information about me and you publish it.
But Donald Trump is the president. Donald Trump is the president. You can't discredit. I mean, Barack Obama would have, his legacy is his legacy. Now, unless there's a big conspiracy that's uncovered, this is an ongoing attempt to undermine the sitting president. That's very different than something that's backwards looking.
I don't think it's an undermining of Trump. I think it's basically a compilation of capturing facts. We know that he's pro-Russian. He has Russian ties from his business.
Whoa. How do you know he's pro-Russian? Just because he said good things about Vladimir Putin, or he took a different perspective? And then these ties, who are these ties? Who are these associates? Was it his I mean, there's always these sort of fuzzy lines about, well, he loves Russia and he's got ties. I even think that's sort of clouding the waters.
No, and then that's just it. I don't. If you have an associate who is of sketchy background and he is being investigated and you seem to have a fairly consistent affinity for basically being associated with that person, you are automatically going to become part of investigating that individual and their background. And if you start to see it's not just one individual, but a second and a third and a fourth, then you're starting to see a pattern. You have to investigate that and see where it goes.
Well, that's what they've done, and they've found nothing thus far. I mean, the reality is candidate Trump had a pretty shallow pool of people to draw from initially because he wasn't taken seriously. So he had to hire who he could, where he could, some of which, like Paul Manafort and others, have had ongoing relationships with Russia or the Ukraine or others. But there's no proof that at any point were those people pushing collusion with Vladimir Putin. It was, remember, Barack Obama who said he'll have more flexibility after the election. It was Barack Obama who tried to hit the reset button. It was Barack Obama who wanted messages transmitted to Vladimir. So I just think it's an attempt to not just undermine on policy, but undermine the credibility of President Trump. When you talk about associates, you talk about things that have happened a long time ago. There still is no hard evidence that the Trump campaign or the Trump transition was reaching out to Russia and saying, give us stuff on Hillary. If that comes out, then that is a problem. But we haven't seen it yet. So, Sid, I thank you for the call. I appreciate your perspective. Clearly, you've thought these things through, which is all we can ask for. Brian, in Long Island, you've got some thoughts about the surveillance as well.
Yes. First of all, as far as Trump and Putin go, I mean, you're coming into the most powerful position in the world. You don't want to come in declaring somebody a fascist, or even if he is. I mean, that's not smart. And Trump's pretty smart. I think he's proven that he's pretty successful and pretty smart. But moreover, on the point that you're talking about. I have two issues with it. I think the most dangerous being that now there's precedent for CIA and the dark government to possibly manipulate elections or people's perception throughout now the future, and it could go both ways, and it blows my mind that people are basically saying I hate this man so much that I don't care about that. I just want to see, him go down. And they're putting that first. You know, they need to put this country first.
Boy, you know, wouldn't it be nice if we got to a place where country could be put first? You're seeing it play out actually right now on the television screen on Fox News Channel. Representative Schiff, who's the Democrat ranking member on the Intel community, just took to the podium and said, I am deeply discouraged by this week's events. He said there's absolutely no basis for the wiretap claim that President Trump made. I don't know if he's talking literally about wiretapping or about surveillance, but that's a committee, the House Intel Committee, that's traditionally been fairly bipartisan in an Overwatch capacity, attempting to get to the truth of what goes on. We've got to have at least institutions like that where the truth can be found. Otherwise, you know, how do we call balls and strikes on facts or on truth? It gets pretty difficult to get to. Brian, thanks very much for the call. It's clear. I mean, I just sit here right now watching the news unfold as we have this conversation on two. It's troubling on one level. It's fascinating on another. It's watching partisanship manifest itself. It's watching the legacy of presidential campaigns, candidates, presidents themselves. And I'm personally fascinated by this vote that's going to happen this afternoon. Some people can dismiss it and say it's not going to matter or whatever. But no, it really does matter. And it matters. And you're seeing both sides already tee up the blame game. And you've got, you know, the New York Times story this morning that talks about how the White House is saying, well, we never really wanted to go first with health care, but Paul Ryan and others, they did. And so we went with that, and we kind of regret that. And again, it's anonymously sourced to the New York Times. So I think you've got to take that with a grain of salt a little bit. But then you also have now House leadership. And we just got information from John Roberts, Fox's own John Roberts, who sent out some information attributable to a senior House leadership official. So an anonymous senior House leadership official, likely affiliated with Paul Ryan, pushing back on saying this is why we did health care first in the House. It was the most urgent and a repeated promise. The House, Senate, and the administration, they don't agree on a tax plan yet, so repeal and replace, there was agreement, so we went with that first. Even if there was agreement on tax reform, it takes a really long time, so we didn't want to start with something that takes months to draft. Hence, we didn't do fundamental tax reform first. We went to Obamacare. It's a series of points. You can see it right now. The deck is being stacked on both sides to point the finger if this vote doesn't go the right way or if it goes the right way. Because as Chris Stirewalt pointed out earlier this hour, it's not clear that Donald Trump gets a overall win by winning this vote. I think he does. I think you'd rarely win by losing. If he loses, the mainstream media is going to go nuts and say that he lost his first major initiative, and it's going to drain his political capital, and he can't even rein in his own party. So here's why he's damaged. But if he wins, now he's got to go to the Senate and push an even more difficult terrain for a bill that remains unpopular, that'll have to go back to the House for another vote. It's a hard slog. So as someone who'd like to see the disruptive agenda of Donald Trump disrupt Washington, it's hard to watch them wade through in those boots through the swamp in an attempt to say, hey, we said we would repeal and replace Obamacare. We're going to do it. But then we get handed this imperfect bill that no one really likes, that was written by Paul Ryan, who sold us that there was more consensus for it than there really was. So now we're having to roll up our sleeves and go to Capitol Hill and make the case for it. And if we win, great, we win. And that's a good sign for the Trump presidency and his ability to get an art of a deal or get a deal done. But if he loses, then I believe it does sit at the feet of Paul Ryan. I do believe it sits at the feet of those who should have had 7 years to package something like this, 7 years to do something that's palatable, and instead waited to the last minute. And it doesn't look like the kind of bill that, you know, real free market folks would want to support. They're coming alongside it because they support the president and his agenda, which is admirable. And I think worth considering when it comes down to a final vote. You don't want your president going down on the first big one. But where does it go? Man, it's watching history unfold. And that alongside this ongoing investigation in the intel community underscores how difficult the case is going to be for President Trump to push through something that the American people voted. They spoke. They want things to change. Washington doesn't change easily, and events like this are proof positive of that. Your call's still coming in. We're going to have a little bit of time in the back half of the hour. We're going to try to take them when we come back. Again, it's Kilmeade and Friends, 1-866-408-7669. like big bills, and I cannot lie. That is what we're going with. Eric has outdone himself. Well done, sir. We keep the music fresh on Fridays, especially when your humble guest host, Pete Hegseth, is on for Brian Kilmeade. I don't think he knows the music that we play. If we told him, he'd be like, Dad. I think he'd slap us on the back and say, stop it. Stop it. I'm pretty sure he would. But he gave us the microphone, so we're going to run with it. And we've got your calls. We'll jump right to them here as we round out the hour. Rick in St. Louis, you've got some thoughts on today's vote on Obamacare repeal.
Yeah, first of all, Obamacare is not just about the health care system. It's filled with all kinds of future taxes. And if those taxes are enacted, you're going to pay part of your real estate sales back to Obamacare. The act needs to be repealed. That's what they promise. And I tell you what, the Republicans better wake up, because if they don't, I'm going to start voting libertarian.
So you'd vote. Your message is vote yes.
Huh?
Your message today for a congressman would be vote yes, even if it's not perfect.
No, my message is not rework Obamacare, because if it's reworked, it can easily be resurrected, or parts of it can be resurrected. They need to totally repeal it. And I'm tired of hearing about, well, we can't because of reconciliation. Well, if the reconciliation is the problem, then clean that up first. But Obamacare needs to be totally repealed.
Totally get that. I don't disagree with you at all. But right now, so a choice before Congress is one particular bill with certain aspects. You're saying you would, because you know that if you voted no on it today, you would be effectively enshrining Obamacare in perpetuity.
If you vote no on it today, it's not in perpetuity. You tell the Congress to get their act together, get the reconciliation problem solved, then go back and do what they promised and repeal Obamacare, and then put the law in place, which they should have already had worked out. I mean, they've had 6 years to do this.
That's a fair criticism. They've had 7 years to do it. Here we are with this bill that no one really likes, that people worry doesn't go far enough in fixing the distortions that Obamacare created. So, but you're saying you would not vote for the repeal and replace as it has been presented by Paul Ryan.
No, because it's reworked Obamacare. Reworked Obamacare can be resurrected. This is Ryan care. I don't think Ryan gets it. I don't think the Republicans get it. This isn't going to fall on Trump's shoulders.
I don't think it will. I think you're right. If this does not pass, I do think it falls on Paul Ryan. I think it becomes a failure of Ryan care. He's the one that wanted this bill more than Trump, and I think characterized it, unfortunately, maybe not even intentionally, unfairly to the Trump White House. Rick, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. We're going to go to Liz in Chicago. Liz?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, my comment on this health insurance repeal, reform, whatever the case is, first of all, they're not being very transparent of what's in the bill that they're trying to push through. So I couldn't vote yes or no on the bill that they're trying to push through. But my simple solution is to all these congressmen, they have great insurance that we, the citizens, pay for. Shouldn't we have the same as they do? Why can't they present, hey, we're going to give you the same insurance as all your congressmen have? And that would be the solution.
Well, because I'm sure I don't know every aspect of their health care plans, but I have a feeling that it's highly subsidized as well to keep premiums low and deductibles low and have the nice, cushy, gold-plated plans that they do. I like that idea. I like anything that makes Congress play by the same rules as citizens. I like even more, which I mentioned on a previous hour, I like even more the idea that members of Congress would have to use the VA, what our veterans face, because I think you'd see the VA fixed pretty quickly if they had to do that. Liz, thanks for the call. We're jumping back over to the surveillance argument because we've got a couple more calls in the queue. We've really been bouncing between the two topics all morning long. Mark in Jasper, Missouri. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Hey, yeah, I think John Bolton was right about 3 months ago. I think this is a red herring because Hillary sold 20% of our uranium stock. Podesta sits on a board who the majority members of the board are Russian businessmen.
So you're saying the red herring is the collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, right?
No. Yeah, I think the red herring is that. I don't think there's hardly anything there.
Yes.
I think what is happening is a smokescreen by the media protecting the former Democrats that were in power. And Podesta was in Bill Clinton's White House. He would have been in Hillary's White House.
Yep.
I mean, that puts it right back square into them, and I think that needs to be shouted from the
Mark, we're going to leave it right there. I will shout it. I will second your opinion and shout it from the rooftops for you. I think the Russian connection thing has been a ruse from the beginning to discredit this president, to try to just take breadcrumbs and make it into a case that he is not legitimate, that he's a puppet of Vladimir Putin, and it's all ridiculous. You look at Trump himself and the people around him who have been involved in his effort. Corey Lewandowski, who was there from the beginning, definitively never collusion. Everyone else across the spectrum, there's not there. Well, it's been fun this hour with everyone. Thanks for all the calls. Been really fired up and really informed, as Kilmeade's audience always is. This vote tonight is going to be interesting. It's going to be tight, and it's going down to the wire. Thank you for joining me on Kilmeade and Friends. Friends? How about Kilmeade and Friends? It's been fun. Thank you.